I've just done a few. Just done a few pictures of the towers. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're from. This is Shooting the Dice, and I'm with my friend who's coming on the show, probably much to his displeasure. No, I'm sure not. But Vic Ferrari. Thank you for coming on again, Vic.
Hey, Rob, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah, I just did a little intro just to emphasise the horrors of what happened, obviously, in New York in 9/11. I remember I was working in a concrete factory, and I was a concrete finisher back in this. I was 21, and we were eating lunch, and you had a little telly up on the canteen, and it was around about midday. I think it was shortly before 1 o'clock, and I remember that it was just whatever it was on. I think it was usually the news or some program on there, and it just came on with these towers, and we were like, "What's this? A movie?" And then before we kind of got to understand what it actually is, what it was another one hit, and we're just like, what's going on here? And then obviously the aftermath of it with it was Bush, wasn't it? Bush, and then Blair, our side, were doing the talking to the camera and talking to the world. Yeah, it was a real tragic time, and hopefully we don't see anything like that, well, forever, but certainly for the rest of our days. You were in the force, weren't you, Vic, when this happened? Can you explain where your side of things, what was going on in your life at the time, and
Yeah,
how you got involved?
it was a Tuesday, and that specific morning, I came in early that morning. I usually came in at 9:30 in the morning. I was coming in early. Started my tour at the office up in the Bronx at 7 a.m. The reason I was coming in early was a couple of weeks earlier, I had locked this guy up with a couple of stolen cars. He was in jail in Manhattan, and I was going to work out an agreement with the district attorney's office and his defense attorney. We were going to get him out of jail, and he was going to work with us. And he supposedly had information on a stolen car ring, and he knew about some people in Department of Motor Vehicles that were providing good driver's licenses under phony names. So I wanted to talk to him again and work out an agreement and possibly sign him up as a confidential informant. Excuse me. So I got to my office about 7 a.m. I was supposed to leave my office no later than 8. And that was pushing it, because from the Bronx to lower Manhattan, it's a ride. You're going to hit rush hour traffic. Then you got to look for parking. And I was going to go with my sergeant. So I get there at 7. My sergeant isn't there. 7:30, my sergeant isn't there. He comes rolling into the office about 8 o'clock. And I says, come on, you got to move. We got to get down there, because they're going to pull him out of jail. Department of Corrections is going to bring him from Rikers Island. They're going to bring him to the courthouse. They're not going to let him sit around forever. The district attorney might get pissed off at us. The deal could fall apart. So you want to be there on time. You want to be prepared. And for whatever reason, my sergeant just was not in the same mode I was, and he's a great guy. But anyway, finally I get him motivated. Let's go. And just as we're about to leave the office, my office was on the second floor of the New York City Housing Police, and one of the housing cops, uniform guys, ran upstairs, and he said, put on the television set, a plane hit the World Trade Center. So we put on the news, and we saw, there was smoke coming out of one of the towers, and nobody really knew what had happened yet. It hadn't been reported yet that it was a commercial jetliner that struck the tower. And you got to remember, New York City, you have 3 major airports. You have LaGuardia, Kennedy, and Newark. And then you have smaller airports for private planes like Teterboro. And so we thought it was quite feasible that some, aviation enthusiast lost control of this small plane, like a little Cessna or something, had a heart attack or engine failure and hit the building. So while we're watching this on television, here comes the other jet, and it hits the other tower. And we're like, oh, shit. Now we know this is terrorism. Doesn't happen twice in the same day. So immediately phone started ringing off the hook. One police plaza called up, said, "Get into uniform, everybody on standby, nobody leave." And I remember, like, I'm in a plainclothes unit, so I mean, I had my uniform in my locker, but now it's like all hands on deck. Where guys are running across the street to a bodega and stacking up on candy bars and sodas and water because you don't know what you're going to get yourself involved in. You don't know how long you're going to be down there. I remember one guy made a run down the block to like a store to get T-shirts. So underneath the uniform, because that polyester shirt will scratch the hell out of you, or if guys are going to wear their bulletproof vest, the vest will stick to you. So anyway, by probably, I don't know, 12 o'clock, phone call came. I have no idea who spoke to who, but we were put in different cars and we drove down to Manhattan. We drove down the West Side Highway. And I remember just seeing paper and debris flying around. There were police cars and fire trucks and emergency vehicles all lined up along the West Side Highway. The towers had fallen by then. And by 1:30, I mean, myself and my office, we were walking around. I mean, and they really didn't know what to do with us. Like, first somebody commandeered like a tour bus. And we were sitting on this tour bus and we're driving in, and it almost looked like a Universal Studio thing where there was a building on fire. And I'm like, we're kind of sitting ducks in this bus if something else comes down. So we got off the bus. They broke us up into different groups. And I was with a bunch of guys. We came down Broadway, I think. And it looked like something out of a horror movie. I mean, it was, the closer you got to Ground Zero that day, the darker it was, because with all the particles in the air from the buildings, the sunlight had difficulty getting through. So it was like when they say when a volcano erupts, where you get these magnificent sunsets because the sunlight can't get through the prism. Well, it wasn't magnificent. It was very, very bleak and dark, and everything was covered in that, toxic dust, and everything was abandoned. Like, there were food carts abandoned. There were unit cars abandoned with the doors open. It was crazy. And the one thing I'll never forget walking down there was I saw hundreds, if not thousands, of pairs of women's high heel shoes. So when women were running out of those financial buildings, the World Trade Center, or just getting the hell out of Lower Manhattan, they can't run in their heels. They took their heels off and just dumped them. So I'll never forget that. I saw hundreds, if not thousands, of pairs of women's high heel shoes. So we're coming down Broadway, and we had to use the bathroom and take a break. One of the buildings, the maintenance guys had hung around, and we saw people inside the building, and they come on in. They let us in, and we were able. They gave us these little that day. They gave us like these little bullshit masks that you would buy at Home Depot if you're going to demo your bathroom. It wasn't, something with respirators on it, everything. No, it was just one of those little paper masks. So we got into the building, and they were nice to us. They let us use the bathroom. They provided us with water. And we were just, trying to we were talking to the maintenance guys. We were telling them what we saw, and they're telling us what they heard when the buildings came down. And we're just kind of making small talk. And one of the guys that worked there was from Afghanistan. I mean, what's the odds of that happening? And he basically told us chapter and verse what was going on. He went into how Osama bin Laden came in there to push out the Soviets when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and then he stayed around too long, and he had all this money, and then he turned on the United States. I mean, the guy knew. He knew the story behind the Taliban providing security for him. It was pretty interesting. I mean, he seemed like a patriotic guy, but he was telling us how he still had family back there. So we left, and we descended upon Ground Zero. And like I said, the closer you got to Ground Zero, the darker it got. And it was crazy because there was no rhyme or reason to anything down there. So there was debris everywhere. It was like you'd see a laptop computer there, or a baseball that might have come off of someone's desk. And as we got up to the pile, there was the pieces of the facade had come down hundreds of feet and embedded itself in the concrete. And I always say I felt like Charlton Heston in the last scene of Planet of the Apes, when he sees the Statue of Liberty head on the beach, and he's like, what is that? And then it dawns on him, the Statue of Liberty must have come apart at some point in time and is now washed up on this beach. It's in the ruins. And that was the same thing with the World Trade Center. And while we're down there, I mean, it was dangerous. I mean, you didn't want to step on anything. And this guy walks by us, I'll never forget, in a white spacesuit, like a Tyvek suit, and he's got what looks like a Geiger counter. And we're like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, is he from the government, or is it some guy from New Jersey that's got a Geiger counter and said, today's the day, and rushed in there? But there was a lot of crazy shit. And they didn't know what to do with us. So I was down there from probably about 1:30 in the afternoon till about 5:30, 6 o'clock the following morning. And then they pulled us out and they took us to the east side of Manhattan for whatever reason. And they were going to decontaminate us. Well, that consisted of two guys that we stepped in a bucket and they sprayed our clothes down with water and told us, yeah, run this through a washing machine. Like, thanks. So they told us, be back at our office the following day about 5, 6 o'clock. We're going to do this again. And for the first couple of days, that's exactly what I did. Went into work, put on my uniform, went down there and just, provided security around the perimeter of it down there. And what was wild is within 2 days, you started seeing, well, actually the second day there were people already had flown into New York, different agencies. I remember there was a team there from Missouri with cadaver dogs. New Jersey pitched in quite a bit. Connecticut, because they're right down the line. New York State Police were there. But I remember like by day 2, so you got to remember, everything's covered in dust. And I remember like by day 2, we saw a Winnebago with Chicago plates. It was a bunch of cops from Chicago that climbed into a Winnebago. And like, they must have blown every light to get here in like a day and a half. So you had like cops from Chicago in a Winnebago parked like blocks from ground zero. And then I remember seeing like all the cars were covered in dust and people wrote with their fingers like, fuck you, Bin Laden, and stuff like that. So I mean, it just was a wild time. And so then what they did is after a couple of days, they pulled us out. We went back to work, and then they would bring us in. I remember once, like maybe a week or two after like that toxic cloud kind of blew away, they brought us back, and then I was on the bucket brigade. And the bucket brigade is like, we were ants on a pile of sugar. So there'd be like 40, 50 guys in one line, and someone would fill like a joint compound bucket with debris, and you'd pass it down the line, and then they would sort it out at a station. I did that for a while. But I mean, most of my time after the initial day was, since I worked in the auto crime division, they started taking the debris out of there. After a couple of weeks, they realized they had to bring in heavy equipment. They'd still be there with joint compound buckets. So they started bringing in heavy machinery, cranes, bulldozers, and they started taking the stuff out and putting it in trucks. Well, that posed a problem because where are you going to put all this stuff and where are you going to sort all this stuff? And earlier that year, they had just closed this landfill out in Staten Island. I think it's called the Fresh Kills landfill in Staten Island. They reopened it, and they started bringing truckloads of this stuff out there, the debris, and then they sent up conveyor belts, and they started going through the debris piecemeal to identify victims and personal items, which was a monumental task. But I worked in auto crime. So what they had us doing was the World Trade Center had a parking garage beneath it. So, and then around the World Trade Center, there were hundreds, if not thousands of cars that were destroyed. So when those things started coming up, they started going out to the dump, and they had us with, sawzalls and the jaws of life opening up these vehicles to make sure no one was, perished in there. But we never found anybody in any of those vehicles. But they also had us investigating a lot of people. The theory, well, I don't know if they locked anybody up for it, but there was a theory that people might start putting in insurance claims on cars that weren't down there. So that was the thing that we were looking into. But I spent quite a bit out at that dump in Staten Island.
You say I can hear myself there. Right. Yeah. You say that these guys they improvised, didn't they? With you stood in a bucket and telling you to put it in your washing machine, because I guess they didn't have any. They probably didn't know what they were doing. No one was prepared for this. So they were just like, oh my God, we need to think what we can do to make it look like we're doing something that's meaningful and caring for the emergency services. So they kind of thought, what can we do that's the best thing? and then like that they kind of did what they did with you. Because nowadays, because I remember often in the city that's near me, I say often, that's an exaggeration. Now and again in the city that I live in, they do like these mock um, like terrorism incidents. So like
Right.
everything. So I guess it's just in case something does happen. And something funny enough did happen in the city that I lived in. Some weirdo went into the toilet and blew himself up in the toilet, but he didn't really do a very good job. I don't think anyone was killed, but it was like it was still a he had a bomb and was
What a way to
failed
go.
attempt. Yeah. So funny enough, my mum was in the city at the time, and they did all the cordons and stuff like that. So I guess nowadays, and I'm sure it's the same in the States and probably like all of the free world. Nowadays, if something like this happens, you probably everyone's like geared, knows what they're doing. They've got, I'd like to think so anyway. They've got like disinfectant stuff. So if it happens, so yeah, so it's interesting you say that, but I guess
Well, you're always playing catch up.
yeah.
I know this working in law enforcement. You're always playing catch up with the disaster, and you learn, unfortunately, with each disaster and how to prepare and how much manpower and what tools you may or may not need. Like you were saying about like, yeah, it was improvised because, and this is a sad thing to say, and I know it'll be controversial, but within a day or two, if you were down there within a day or two, you knew nobody was coming out of that pile. It just was fairly obvious the way that thing came down. Those poor people were just disintegrated. I mean, it was obvious. And the smell of death, I mean, after a couple of days, and what made matters worse was it would rain. I mean, it's still warm. It was like an Indian summer, so it would rain and then it would warm. So just the smell down there was unimaginable. So it was obvious to anybody that spent any time down there that they weren't going to find anybody. But, politically, nobody wants to hear that. How do you tell somebody, that's holding out hope that their husband or their kid, is not going to come out of there? They went through the whole motions of having us down there doing things by hand. And then after a couple of weeks or maybe month, they said, we got to start getting in there and getting some of this stuff out to make sense of this. And here's the thing a lot of people don't get credit for. It was the construction workers that did just as much work, if not more, than the cops and the firemen and the EMTs down there. Like the unions, the iron workers, the heavy equipment operators. I mean, those guys risked their lives just as much as anybody. I mean, they were getting in there and cutting things with torches and hooking things to cranes, and they were down there too, and they're getting cancer too as a result of spending time down there. So I think they should get just as much credit, if not more, than us, because really it was a recovery effort and then it was a cleanup effort, really. I mean, nobody wants to hear that, but that's basically what it became after a couple of weeks.
Have you had any long-lasting, emotional, physical issues from it?
Emotional, no. I definitely, my allergies, you hear me now with I got a little bit of a cough. I never had that before. I go for cancer screening every year. I actually got to make an appointment. So far, so good. But I know a lot of people that have passed from cancer, different crazy cancers, guys getting lung cancer that never smoked a cigarette in their life. I know a lot of people that have passed.
I think when I think of the 9/11 attacks, I think of pain. Obviously, so many people were directly impacted, the people that perished. But you think of all the families, all the friends, all of the cousins, the work colleagues. It was probably millions and millions of people felt pain. Even people who were sort of detached from it, like me, for instance, who was just watching it on telly. The world, I think, was in pain for quite a long time following that. And I always think of how tragic that is. Funnily enough, I went to New York City in 2006. I was there for New Year's, and I went to the site because I think now it's is it commemorative even wall with the names of the people on it. When I went in 2006, there was still building, demolition, body finding going on. There was still what you described, workman vehicles and things like that all going on. And I remember distinctly, because there was a museum which wasn't very far away from where the tragedy happened. And we went to the museum. And I remember this guy was outside of it, was actually spurting anti-American like propaganda. and I remember like how amazed I was. Like I guess I wasn't very worldly then. That someone was allowed to do that. Someone was allowed to, in such a horrific circumstances, to essentially bat for the other side, right on the doorstep of where the tragedy happened. He's giving up leaflets and all that.
Oh yeah,
it does take balls. But I guess when I was younger, my first thought was, hey, someone should take this guy away. And obviously now I'm a bit more aware of this kind of free speech, and especially America, the home of, the free speech, etc. So I kind of like understand it more now, but I couldn't understand it at the time. I was like, I was mortified that someone would stand there and do that.
That's Manhattan. If he would have pulled that shit, say in the Bronx or Brooklyn, different neighborhoods, someone would have hit him. Someone wearing an Abraham Lincoln mask and a baseball bat would have given him a shot in the back of the head.
Yeah, well, maybe somebody did, but I just didn't see. I just didn't see it, and there was obviously cops around as well, so probably somebody didn't have it. Did policing change since that for you?
There was a lot more training, as far as I mean, in the coming years after 9/11, the equipment changed. Everybody got a mask in a plastic bag to keep with you at all times. Just throw it in the car in case you need it. Training, I went for explosives training and just see the impact of bombs and how far to stay away. And so, I mean, there was a lot of training, and I guess through FEMA, there was a lot of equipment that came our way.
So I guess, did you have training about what to do? Like, I was just describing kind of a mock training session, that training exercise.
They would do dry runs.
Sort of thing?
They would do dry runs with different things. Different units were tasked with doing that. Or in the NYPD, they call it a mobilization, and there's different levels of mobilizations as far as a precinct, a borough. So yeah, they would do mock mobilizations every now and then.
Was it surreal? Yeah, sorry, no, go on.
No, to get everybody to respond to a certain area.
So you kind of knew what you were doing.
It was just to get everybody on the same page. That, like, in the United States, every now and then they'll do like a broadcast that basically it freezes the television and says, this is only a test. If this was a real emergency, you'd be told, I guess that's in the event of a nuclear holocaust or an invasion or God knows what. But basically they had within the NYPD, if, there was a mobilization, you would know where to go and what to bring and how many people to go to one area and people to go to another area. So they kind of figured that out.
Was it, when you said you were there, you stood at the kind of bottom of the towers, was it a surreal experience for you? Were you just like, oh my God, only like, I don't know, a few minutes ago I was doing my Grand Theft Auto type stuff, and then all of a sudden I've seen these iconic buildings at my feet?
Well, I remember, like, we were in the cars, like, heading down there, and by that point in my career, I had like 14 or 15 years in, so I had seen so much. But nothing had prepared me for that. I mean, a bunch of people get killed, horrific car accidents. It's terrible, but I know what to expect. This, I didn't know what to expect. I felt like a child, actually. I mean, while I was down there looking at it, because I felt like a child seeing something for the first time and not really understanding how that happened. What's behind it? How did it get there? It challenges you mentally, because you're like, how the fuck did this just happen? It's wrapping your head around something, even with all my experience.
Do you think it was a good response? An appropriate response from the powers that be to the tragedy? Like, Bush obviously came, didn't he, and stood on with a moment of solidarity, kind of in amongst it.
Yeah, I mean, he had to. I mean, that was the right call to go there. There's been so many books written about why it happened. Did the intel agencies know? Did they know more? Did one agency not share information that could have prevented it? I don't know. We're never going to know the answer to it. Maybe 70, 80 years from now, someone unearthed something. But at the time, I mean, Bush said and did all the right things. I mean, we were at war, obviously. And then that spills into, I mean, we had a hit back. We knew he was in Afghanistan. So obviously that was the first place to start. But then it kind of morphed into Iraq, and, American people, it was still an open nerve. Should we have gone into Iraq? I really don't know the answer to that because, again, we're not told the whole truth.
I remember having that. You may know, but there's something in the UK called the House of Commons. Yeah. So it's where all of the politicians, I say all the politicians, elected politicians from each area, which we're going to have in a general election in a few days. Actually, they all sit, and it was obviously a packed Commons. And I remember distinctly thinking, we need to go and get these people, but we were fed a lie. Well, I think a lie that, well, it was a lie that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. So Tony Blair got whether he knew it, whether he didn't know it. There was the argument here is that he wanted to cozy up to Bush. So we said, right. Basically he said, we'll just do whatever you want us to do. But it's interesting. I was watching a documentary a couple of days ago, actually, and Bush came to the UK and he was in a hotel or suite somewhere. I can't remember. It might have been Alistair Campbell, who was his head of spin doctor, head of PR. And he said, no, it wouldn't have been him because he would have known. Somebody anyway, it went up to Tony and said, oh, let's go in across the street and get a bagel, something like that. And he goes, no, I can't walk the streets. And I was like, wow. So he's literally that? Tony Blair. He can't walk the streets of this country. People hate him for that.
I didn't know that.
No, he doesn't live in the UK. He lives somewhere in the Middle East, I think, somewhere around that area.
Really?
When he came to the UK, there was something called the Leveson inquiry. And was it Leveson? Or it was an inquiry. It was actually, I think, in the inquiry into 9/11. Wasn't the Leveson was phone tapping, but it was an inquiry into 9/11, and he sat in front of that committee, and he brought with him a significant team of bodyguards. Because it's not just people have anger for him because they feel like he took Britain to war. Yeah, well, took Britain to war, a lot of lives lost, etc., and a lot of brains messed up of the people that served there.
Sure.
But also, I guess you've got the bad guys in the country that hate him, or maybe not even the bad, maybe just average citizens of Iraq, which I've met many actually. I don't know what they think of Blair, but who dislike him. So it's a very dangerous. This country is a very dangerous place for Tony Blair.
I didn't know that. I had no idea. I thought, after he left public service, he's, living out in the countryside. So I had no idea that he had to leave his own country.
No, it was interesting because he was in power for, was it 12? It came in 97, and he left it to Brown in 2009, I think it was. So he had 12 years, and most people think he did a reasonable job of the country, turned it around from the Conservative years, but the one thing that he is known for, and the only thing he's really known for by the masses, is
getting you guys involved in that war.
Taking us, involved in the war. And what's interesting is you had Thatcher. I don't want to get too political with people here, but not that long beforehand, took us to fight the Falklands, and right. She was a hero. But the difference is, I suppose, the argument would be, well, the Argentines invaded UK territory, whereas the Bin Laden didn't invade UK territory, wasn't a threat to us.
Right, and the Falklands were over in 15 minutes. It wasn't. It wasn't.
But that's
Didn't,
true. That's true.
it didn't go on for years, and people were coming back in body bags, and like you said, all fucked up.
Yeah, and I think it's the potential of the lie, which was the that's a big thing. It was whether Blair knew there wasn't weapons of mass destruction. Lots of people think he did, and like I say, he just cozied up to the States. But yeah, he's really not a liked figure in this country, I'm sure.
I didn't know that.
Simon, welcome, Simon. Are you from the UK, Simon? I can't remember. I was just wondering I can't remember if he is. I imagine he'd say the same thing. But yeah, how are you doing, Simon? You all right? Good to see you. Yeah, we're just chewing the cud about 9/11 and the impact of it. So, were your family then, Vic? Were you concerned about your family? Oh, Atlanta, apologies. Were you? Were you? I think you took. Oh, I don't know. Were you concerned about your family? Were you pretty sure that they weren't anywhere near the towers that day?
No, my family, my parents were retired. They rarely left the neighborhood. But I knew. I mean, on 9/11, I knew two of the cops that responded that were killed. One guy actually used to work in my old precinct, Tommy Langone. He was a really nice guy. The other guy, Jerome Dominguez, was from my neighborhood. I didn't know him. I just knew him around the neighborhood. But there were guys, a couple of people I went to high school with that perished. My friend's mother died in the towers. So, I mean, like you said, I mean, if you lived in the New York City area, you either knew somebody or you knew somebody that was impacted by it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Tragic, interesting. It all the same about how tragic it's happened. Has anything happened? Pops into my mind is the Boston Marathon. There's probably something else that has slipped my mind. Has anything happened? Obviously not on the scale of 9/11, but in New York since that, any terrorism?
Oh yeah, there was I mean, I was already retired, but didn't you have something in Manhattan where the guy was running people over down in Lower Manhattan? There's been a couple of incidents, nothing to the degree of 9/11, but yeah, there's been little pockets of things that have happened. I'll tell another story from 9/11 I just thought of. A couple of days after, they had us going on rooftops of buildings, just looking to see if debris or something made it up there. And I'll never forget, I was on Murray Street. And this is a couple of days after 9/11. And we went up on the roof of this building. We found a piece of the landing gear. And it was blocks away. If that thing would have hit somebody, it would have tore him up. But we found a hunk of landing gear on the roof of a building.
Wow. Was there many people that you know of that perished? No, you said that, like, quite a way away from the scene. Like, obviously that could have easily have wiped some people out, and that was quite away from the Twin Towers.
No, and that is a miracle, that more people weren't killed. I know what you mean, but no, I didn't know anybody that died further down from ground zero.
No. Wow.
So like in the coming weeks, we were down there. Celebrities started showing up, and celebrities, especially a lot of the New York celebrities, started like doing meet and greets down there. So you'd be sitting around taking a break on the Bucket Brigade. I remember Robert De Niro. That's a funny story. We're all sitting around. It's hot. It's got to be like 100 to 200 of us easily. And all of a sudden, we're all sitting around, and everybody starts getting up. And I'm like, what's going on? And I said, De Niro's here. And he was like the Messiah. He's walking through the crowd, and you got all these young guys, between the 20s and 40s who grew up in New York watching Robert De Niro movies. And everybody's jumping up, shaking his hand. And my sergeant goes, go shake his hand. I go, I don't want to buy. He goes, go shake his hand. He goes, you'll never forget, you'll never forgive yourself. So I went over, and I go, Mr. De Niro, I'm a huge fan. He made that smug.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got to meet him. Billy Baldwin I met. Let's see. A lot of football players, baseball player, a lot of the football players and retired football players from the Jets and the Giants were down there. I mean, I forget. I mean, it's so long ago, but there was a lot of people down there, just wanting to say thanks and just show their support.
Did you were saying about celebrities then? So were celebrities coming down to the area to capitalise on the tragedy?
No, I don't think they was capitalizing on it, and it's not like they were being followed around with reporters. And you got to remember, this is 2001. Everybody had a flip phone. People weren't posting stuff on social media like nowadays. You know what I mean? So, did I hear about the Mafia? Well, Simon, that's funny you should bring that up because that's the first thing we thought of because a lot of the carting companies in New York City, at the time, private sanitation companies were either mob affiliated or out and out owned by the mob. But it was one of those things where, what were you going to do? Have people show up in vans? It just was one of those things where I think that kind of got overlooked. But yeah, we suspected that.
Wow. So one of the things that perhaps the Mafia didn't do.
Listen, a lot of those carting companies, the last name ends in a vowel. So, and I'm not saying every company is mob owned, but the bidding and all that stuff at the time was controlled by the mob. Absolutely. It's been proven. It's gone to court cases. So, I mean, if you don't play ball, Abraham Lincoln mask and a baseball bat.
Simon said they were scraping the metal on Staten Island, I believe. Oh, scrapping the metal. I wonder whether Simon means...
what Simon means as opposed to going directly to the dump at Fresh Kills, he's meaning it went to a recycling, a scrap metal processor. Is that... It wouldn't surprise me, but I did not hear that.
No.
Simon seems well informed.
Yeah, he did. And you're from Atlanta, aren't you, Simon? Have you... Did you want to jump on, Simon, and have a chat? You've got a few minutes, haven't you, Vic? I don't want to keep you longer than you said. You've got a couple of minutes. Let's see if he wants to jump on. Right, I put the link there for you, Simon, if you want to jump on. So did you work with, the fire service and the ambulance? Did you guys all work together or did you all have your separate kind of operations?
That's a good question. The NYPD and the fire department have I wouldn't say we're friends. It's been a cantankerous relationship over the years over contract disputes and who's going to handle what. But everybody played nice for the most part during that time.
You played nice. So when you first got there, I suppose you were a few hours after it. I guess a lot of the emergency services and construction, well, everybody was running around like, I guess, headless chickens, not knowing what to do or where to go or anything. Was there an element of calm when you went there, or was it still like that?
You mean after the towers fell and I got down there?
Yeah.
Nobody knew what to do. The radio, the citywide radio was just people screaming into it, and I get it. But it was organized chaos. I mean, there was no reason to march us in there. I mean, there was nothing we could do. But I get it. We're emergency workers, and we went in there. I have no regrets about it. Looking back, I mean, health wise, I don't know what the hell I was exposed to, but things started coming together in the coming days. As far as you do this, you do that. And within a couple of days, the iron workers and all those construction workers, they were there the first day, actually, but then it was more organized when they came around.
What was your role? So what did your sergeant, I guess, or superior say to you? Like, Vic, go in there and go in the Twin Towers and see if you could save people. Was that your...
Well, no, the towers
mission?
they had already fallen. I mean, they had already fallen by the time I got there. I was there by about 1:30. No, it was our lieutenant, our commanding officers said, you 20 guys go that way and try to make inroads and see, if anybody needs help and, keep the radio on. That's basically the way it worked.
Did you find anybody that needed help? No.
No, the towers came down 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. So I was there 4 hours, 5 hours after the fact.
How come you weren't there immediately?
My office is in the Bronx. And after the planes hit, we were told, stand by, throw on your uniform and just hang around the office until further notice.
Okay. Oh, Simon's here.
What probably saved my life. Hi, Simon. What would probably save my life was, had my sergeant been on time, I would have been at the courthouse a couple of blocks away from the World Trade Center. So more than likely, when the planes hit, my sergeant and I would have went there to try to help people, and I probably wouldn't be talking to you today.
Oh my God. Really? Wow. It's amazing the twists and turns of life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Close calls. Simon, good to see you. Good to finally chat with you. How you
Hey,
doing?
Rob. Yeah, good to talk with you finally. Been watching you for a while. Always wanted to jump on with you and talk with you, but it's been too long. Glad I could finally do it. Vic, started watching your content recently. Really like it. I love getting
Thank you.
that side of things. We hear a lot from the other side, but it's nice to see what was going on both sides, see what they were thinking at the time. What they were right about, wrong about. Yeah, very interesting.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't know if I have much to add, but I at least wanted to get on and meet you guys.
No,
So
no, it's
yeah.
lovely. Thanks for jumping on. Is there any questions or any that you want to ask, Vic?
Oh, man, I wish I
Can
would
you
have had
think of any?
time. I wish I would have
Yeah.
had
I wish
time.
I would have had.
I know I'm going to think of them all once I get off,
Well, how'd you
Um,
know about that was interesting you brought up about the carding companies being mob involved. Where did you hear that?
so I got really interested and always been interested in the mob content, and then was interested in 9/11 and reading some things about it a while ago. Kind of had a resurgence in interest in it, and I was thinking, what did they? I know they were involved in something. They're always opportunists.
Oh yeah.
So, a simple search brought me to, on the Justice Department website, a mention. I don't have the exact article now, but a mention of them, being down there and going through the scraps and taking them either with Long Island or Staten Island. I could be totally
It would
wrong, but
probably be Staten Island because for them to get that debris into Long Island, they would have gotten caught. So going into Staten Island, all those trucks were going into Staten Island. So for one to make a diversion in Staten Island to a scrap metal if that's what happened, I don't want to cast aspersions on scrap metal processes in Staten Island, but to go to Long Island, everybody would have said there's beams from the World Trade Center going out to Long Island. They would have cut their balls off. So if they were going to Staten Island or through Brooklyn, right, that's another mob stronghold. If there's something out there, so.
sure.
It's possible. Giuliani caught a lot of shit. You got to remember, Giuliani was a former federal prosecutor. And, was it Giuliani? Was it before Giuliani? No, it was Giuliani. There was a big snowstorm in New York City a couple of years before that. And the sanitation department just couldn't keep up with the amount of snow removal. So they used private contractors. And then, Giuliani caught shit from that. Like, you're prosecuting the mob, and then you're using these guys to dump the snow into the Hudson and East River. So it's, like you said, they're opportunists. They own businesses, and you're right. But there were other opportunists too. There were people down there raising money that weren't affiliated with anybody. There were people stealing shit down there. There were people coming around trying to rob shit.
Those situations always bring out the best and the worst type of people. And, speaking of Giuliani, I've always wondered, and I haven't looked deep into this, what I feel like when he was younger, him or maybe a family member had some run-in. Maybe, I don't know this. He seems to have a real personal issue with them beyond, justice. And I've always wondered, what was that,
Well, he's a New York guy. He's Italian. I think he was the right guy for the job. You got to remember, okay, like in the 70s, when the FBI finally started, J. Edgar Hoover's dead, so there's no one to blackmail. Now they're going to finally start looking at the mob, right? But then what does Joe Colombo do? He creates that Italian America Association saying that the FBI is prejudiced against Italians, which was total bullshit, right? So they got the they put so much political pressure with that organization because Joe Colombo basically was shaking down every business in New York City to contribute to this thing, right? And they would have rallies. It was a front. It was a front to break balls. So they actually got the FBI, not to mention the Mafia, in paperwork and forms, and then the Godfather came around, and then they wouldn't mention the word Mafia in the Godfather. So it was getting out of control. So here comes Giuliani as a young federal prosecutor, and guess what? He's Italian. So how can the Justice Department be prejudiced against Italians if the guy leading the charge, last name ends in a vowel?
True. There you go.
He was in the right place at the right time. He was good, don't get me wrong, but he was the right man for the job.
Yeah, and he cleaned up other crime besides,
Oh, yeah.
just Italian OC. I mean, just look at I love looking at the old photographs of Times Square in the 70s and 80s and seeing how it's portrayed in movies.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, the difference between in just a couple of years, it looks like a different city.
What they did with Times Square, they carpet bombed it with narcotics. They just were doing buy and bust round the clock, locking up the drug dealers, chasing around the prostitutes. And then what they did was they created what's called the nuisance abatement program. And that enabled the city, if there are several felony, and I forget the formula for it, but if there's several felony arrests inside a location within a certain period of time, the city can compel the landlord to either A, throw out the tenant, or B, if they don't do something about the tenant, the city can seize the property.
Wow. Gives them a lot of
and
power.
that's basically gave this. And then a lot of these businesses were owned by the mob. So Manny the Horse, Manny the Horse.
Aiello?
No, what is it? Matty the Horse. It'll come to me. Genovese Captain. He basically owned probably half of those sex shops and peep shows and all that other bullshit in Times Square. So now the city is hitting him from all angles. He sold the property. They just sell the property. So, and then Disney bought it, and all Nike and all these flagship companies, all these companies want their flagship stores down there. And that's basically how all the scumbags left. And then, Times Square became, the mecca of capitalism.
Yeah, quite a big change in a quick amount of time. And you think Giuliani was behind that push?
Oh, yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Wow.
I was there for it.
Yeah, you how this might be a dumb question. How often did you were doing mostly at that time auto theft, right? Were you at that
I worked
point?
in narcotics before auto theft.
Oh, wow. I don't know how I didn't know that. So you were in narcotics at that time.
Yeah, I was in Manhattan North Narcotics in 92 or 93 to 94.
Oh, wow, so you must have been like
I was right in the middle of it, but I wasn't in
middle.
Manhattan South. I was in Manhattan North. So Manhattan is split up. The NYPD splits Manhattan in half. I think north of 57th Street is Manhattan North. South is Manhattan South. So I was in Manhattan North Narcotics. So I was in Spanish Harlem and Washington Heights. So the guys from Manhattan South would have been carpet bombing Times Square. But we had our hands full up in Spanish Harlem and Washington Heights.
Now, were you and I'm sorry, Rob, I'm not trying to hijack your stream. I just have one more question.
No, go for
it. It reminds me of something kind of currently being discussed. And sorry if I'm off geographically right now. The Bronx, that's up there as well, right?
Yeah, the Bronx is the only landlocked borough of the city.
Okay, so at that time, that was when what is his name? Dominic Sicali, I think. And
Dom is from my neighborhood. Dom is actually, so I grew up in Throgs Neck. I don't know Dom, but I saw him around when he was with Bastiano. He's from Pelham Bay, which borders right up to Throgs Neck.
Okay, so did you ever hear anything about that guy he mentions, Michael Hippie? He was involved in supposedly involved in.
I don't know Hippie, but his name, I don't know him. I never had any dealings with him, but the name, absolutely.
Okay, so you probably heard around about that.
I heard his name. I finally got to see what he looked like a couple of years ago because I looked it up, but I had heard the name.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, he always mentions him and Joey Cupcakes, which is an interesting guy.
That one's new to me. He's from Pleasant Avenue, and then I guess migrated over to Pelham Bay or Throg's Neck. But yeah, I had no dealings with him.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for answering that.
Yeah, no problem.
Listen, Simon, if you ever want to come on, you got some questions when I do a live, just shout me, say drop the link, all right, in the chat, I'll drop the link for you and come on.
I sure will. Well, yeah, I really appreciate it. If I think of something else, I'll ask in the chat. But yeah, thanks
Yeah,
again, Rob.
absolutely.
I'll definitely do it again. And Vic, I'll be keeping watching your content as well. So hope to talk to you again soon.
Okay, I'm going to have a good guest on. I'm going to have the last remaining detective from the French Connection case on today.
Wow, what time?
It's not going to be live, but I'll have it. I'll have it up on my YouTube and the other platforms later tonight. Hopefully, I mean the guy's 93 years old, so I'm really I'm crossing my fingers that it'll go right.
That's going to be a good one. Okay, I'll check that out.
Brilliant. Will that be is that a remote one, Vic? Or are you doing like a face to face with the guy?
No, it's going to be remote. He's still up in New York.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks again, guys.
Okay, Simon, take care.
Thanks again for coming on, bud. All the best.
Anytime, Rob. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers then. Bye.
Cheers.
Yeah, just for anybody, I posted a link to your books on Amazon, and Vic has an amazing channel, the most underrated channel on YouTube, in my view. People need to be subscribing to it and watching his content. You have all sorts of stuff going on there. I won't repeat what I had repeated the other day, but including interviews, one with Louis Ferrante, and it sounds like you've got a cracking one coming up tonight. So yeah, NYPD through the looking glass on YouTube. And also I want to say thank you to Vic, who also has a Miami ex-detective, Ramesh Nyberg, who you interviewed, and that's on your channel. And I was very grateful for you to pass on his
Great
details.
guest.
And yeah, and I've got a interview dropping with him tomorrow. Actually, I should probably put the link on that shortly. But yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, Vic. I know you've got to go, and you've busted over a couple of minutes, so okay. I don't want to keep you from your gallivanting, all the stuff you have to do.
Yeah.
So
you don't gallivant much with a puppy, but yeah. All right,
I was going to say chasing your dog around.
All right, Rob, I got to run. Take care. Thank you again.
No, thank you. Really appreciate you coming on. Cheers.
All right, have a good weekend.
You too. Bye, Vic. Right, guys, I'm just going to... I wonder if I can. I probably can't. I was going to give you a snippet of this upcoming interview with the Miami detective. If I can, I'll just talk about it a little bit. Where is it? Doesn't seem to be on my channel. Give me 2 secs. If I can't find it, I'll talk a little bit about him. Playlists. That's a bit weird. Right, anyway, I'll talk about him for a minute. So, a guy, an ex-homicide. I will be subscribing. Yes, please do subscribe to Vic. It's an amazing channel, honestly. I think he gets a little embarrassed when I say, like, you know, what I say, underrated channel, but it genuinely is. It's brilliant. He deserves, I should say, a lot more subscribers with the effort he puts in. His books. He does many different avenues of content. One of my favorites is about every week. I think he grabs a New York Post and tells stories from it, grabs an article or two, and then talks about it. And yeah, it's great to hear his like analysis, and then a story. One of his stories stems from that. But yeah, the Ramesh Nyberg interview. We speak about the Cocaine Cowboys because he was involved in that case with the hitman. He looked after the hitman, and when he flipped, the hitman flipped. And he knows a guy, he worked for a guy in the department who was actually had a lot to do with the film, the Netflix film, Cocaine Cowboys. We also speak about the Winter Hill Gang. He interviewed Kevin Weeks, Steve Flemmi, and several others. And he was on the hunt for Bulger as well. And he also met John Connolly, the crooked cop, who, let's say, at the very least, turned a blind eye to Bulger's activities. Bulger's FBI case handler he was. And he met him, and his interesting thoughts on him. He also speaks about the Miami riots in, I think it was 1979. He was involved in them, not in the rioting, obviously, from the police perspective. And there was a Mighty Viking, a DJ that was murdered. We speak about them. I think there's several others. But yeah, honestly, guys, I'll share it because I think it's probably one of my favourite interviews. Actually, I thought it was great, and yeah, I'm hoping to have him on for a live as well after the show. He said he would, but he's probably got other commitments. But I'll see if I can get him on. Marta Fowler, very appreciate your comment. Very nice interview. Yes, Marta, he was an FBI agent. He grew up with Whitey Bulger, and rumor has it that he was getting the crap kicked out of him by a bunch of kids, and Whitey Bulger and his clan came over and kicked the crap out of the kids that were kicking the crap out of Connolly. And it's interesting to see where Connolly's mindset was there. I think it was probably that he felt that he was always indebted to Whitey, kind of saving his bacon. And then when he became his case holder, he got closer to Whitey and was, at the very least, turned a blind eye to Whitey's activities. And when tipped Whitey off when the arrests were coming, so hence Whitey fled. And I asked Ramesh if he thinks he knows where Whitey Bulger was hiding. He also, I'm not going to tell you what he said. You can obviously, hopefully you tune in and find out. Also, I asked him, because he was in Boston, if he knew of Joe Molino, and he did. So again, we cover that a little bit and speak about Molino briefly. And what was the other questions? The FBI, his view on the FBI. Let's just say it wasn't pally, so I'll leave it at that. But yeah, it's a really good chat. So I'm a bit annoyed with myself. I can't find the link. Hopefully, I haven't lost it. See if it's in the studio. Just one more time. Studio. Let's see if it's in the studio and I can post it. Right, it is in the studio. Let's see if I can post it. Yeah, it's got a YouTube link. Right. That's an unlisted link. Better not post that one. Right, it is scheduled. I'm not going to bore you guys with me trying to fiddle this stuff out. But when I go away in a minute, when I cross this off, I'll drop it in the chat. Okay. Right. Thanks everybody for joining the show, and thank you, Simon, for coming on. It was great to have you on asking questions. I like to get other people on and get them involved because essentially that's why I came on. I didn't come on. I've always said, if you want somebody who's well versed with the mob, knows that the mob well, is I'm going to say expert, but is an expert in the mob, then go and speak to someone who knows his stuff, like Jeff Nadu. I'm just like you guys. I just had a bit of time. I could I had a little bit of resource behind me. I had the time, and I was watching these interviews, and I was thinking, ask him this, ask him that, and I just thought, I'm just going to see if I can jump on. And I reached out to Jeff, and to my surprise, so I didn't even have a channel at the time. So to my surprise, he said, "Yeah, get your channel up and running, and I'll jump on." And he did, and it seemed to go well, and hence, I'm still here doing the interviews and things like that. But someone messaged me, put a comment, it might have even been one of the lives, saying, "Oh, do you know this person, this gangster drug dealer in the UK, who some years ago was had this crazy story about like drugs in Thailand, and I'd never heard of him. And then the guy said, "Oh, call yourself. You got the gangster channel. I haven't even heard of this person." I was like, "Well, yeah, but it's not what I want to. It's not like I have to. Like I say, I have the knowledge. I'm no expert. I'm just doing like what most of you guys out there are. I just like come on and interview these guys, and I learn a lot about them through researching the people I'm interviewing. So yeah, like I say, if you want someone who knows his stuff, go Jeff Nadu, Tom Lavecchia. He's very informed on these things. But if you're looking for some person with a lot of knowledge, then yeah, just avoid me. Thank you, Simon. Yeah, definitely come on again, bud. It's good to have you on, and it's nice to have other people asking questions, and I learn a lot from the questions that you asked, and because everyone, I guess, comes from a slightly different perspective or a major different perspective. So yeah, it was good you came on, and I think Vic appreciated it too. So yes, definitely come on again. Right, everybody. Thank you so much for. I'm just determined to get this bloody link. I am determined to get it so I can post it before I go off. If I can't get it one last time, then I am definitely gonna let you go. All the time, probably done like several interviews here. Not several, probably about 10 now. And I should really be able to know what I'm doing, but it doesn't look like it's on there. Anyway, I'll go and sort that out and drop it in the chat. Anyway, thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate it. Like I said, tomorrow it's the Miami interview. My interview with the ex-Miami detective is on at 8:55 p.m. my time, so East time. That would be, I think it's 5 hours. Was it 4 or 5 hours earlier? So yeah, couple hours. Yeah, please join in. I think you enjoy it, and then we're going to follow off with a live in a few days after. Yeah, thank you, Marta. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, The Truth. Thanks to the rest of the guys that have commented. Really appreciate it, and catch you soon. All the best. Bye-bye.